We are not saying that oil and gas have no place in our energy strategy as a country. What we are saying is we want to actually give all different energy strategies a chance to succeed as makes sense for individual utilities and states.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Megan McCardle. I'm a columnist at The Post, and I host the Reasonably Optimistic podcast. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts. Did I pronounce your name correct?
You did.
Yes, okay. Excellent. Congressman Auchincloss, welcome to the Washington Post.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get started. So last year you described yourself as an AI skeptic. Where are you now?
I think AI is a general purpose technology at a scale of electricity or the steam engine, in the sense that it's going to affect all different segments of the economy. And I don't cast myself as either a boomer or a doomer, which is what we're hearing a lot of these days. Anytime you're scrolling, you're going to see hot takes from boomers or doomers. The boomers are basically saying, hey, in 2 years, AI is going to cure cancer, and we're all going to be on a beach somewhere living until 150. And the doomers are saying, hey, in 5 years, we're all going to be unemployed, so start queuing up for your government check right now.
That's if our robot overlords allow us to.
Yeah, and learn how to write poetry, because it's going to be like the last human endeavor that people can do. And I just think those are both pretty bad takes. And my general take is I claim no monopoly on wisdom about the future, of course. I do try to be a student of economic history. And what economic history shows us is every single time there is a new technology, it is not job destroying or labor destroying. That is the lump of labor fallacy. It creates new and different types of jobs. And so when people say, hey, everyone's going to be unemployed, it's like, all right, well, let's look at the two most AI exposed fields, which is one, AI coders themselves, and two is radiologists. Can't hire enough radiologists right now. Job vacancies have never been higher for radiologists. Can't hire enough AI coders right now. So there's no evidence in the labor market whatsoever of job destruction. That does not mean that the jobs of the future are going to be the kinds of jobs that we want, though. And that's where policy intentionality really matters, is how are we ensuring that this 50-year trend of the returns to capital continuously exceeding the returns to labor, that gap starts to narrow again, and we create a more equal society with AI, and it doesn't just become, a way to mint more trillionaires, but actually a way to make jobs more dignified, more meaningful, and of course, higher wage.
So talk about that. How do you balance that problem, right? You don't want to, or I assume you don't want China to kind of take the lead in this technology. So you do want to go fast, but you also want to make it so that you're creating good jobs for people, so that the gains are equally distributed.
Yeah.
How do you think about that trade-off between acceleration and management?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a false trade. So I was on the select committee on China for 2 years. Dug deep on China's science and technology, its economy. I spend very little time thinking about what China is doing on this stuff. I think about the Red Sox general manager when I was growing up, Theo Epstein, and he used to say, in April, I look at the Yankees roster, and I can see that they're going to win 100 games. They got the pitching and they got the hitting. They're going to win 100 games. And then he said, and I never look at their stats for the next 6 months, because I got to focus on my dugout. And that's the way I view it. China's got 1.3 billion people. They're minting 100,000 more STEM grads every year than we are. Their kids don't scroll TikTok endlessly. Their kids get educational content on their screens, 90 minutes a day capped. China's going to win 100 games. What's America going to do? Xenophobic immigration policy, trying to slash the National Institutes of Health budget, trying to replace safety and efficacy standards at the FDA with fear and favor under Commissioner McCary. These are things that cause us to, have a losing season, right? So I worry about what America's going to do. And when it comes to AI, when these companies come and they say, hey, if you regulate us, we're going to lose to China. Nonsense. Complete nonsense, okay? We can absolutely put strong guardrails around AI and also lead the world in the science and technology of it. And the guardrails that we need in particular around AI have to do with the role of AI on social media. Social media has been bad for society over the last 15 years. Social media on AI is going to be on steroids, and these bots need to have liability standards like journalists have. These bots need to be prevented from just throwing slop across the internet, and we've got to orient AI towards actually building stuff in the world of atoms and not just, creating these Web 2.0 platforms and making them even richer.
One argument I saw from, I believe, Ethan Mollick, who's a professor at Wharton who thinks a lot about AI, is that he thinks actually AI is going to kill social media because there's going to be so much slop that it's going to be choked off and all the conversations are going to go into kind of private Signal, Discord chats. I mean, shouldn't we then accelerate AI in the hopes that that will be the end of social media and we can all go back to our lives?
Yeah, again, I guess I don't really... There's lots of different ways to prognosticate. Here's what I'm seeing right now as a policymaker is over the course of 11 days in January, Grok generated one child sex abuse image every 40 seconds. And there's no liability for it. People criticized Elon Musk about it. You know what he did? He took that free product, he made it to a premium product. He charged people to be able to generate non-consensual deepfake pornography with Grok. Okay? The three most powerful arbiters of media and information and news today in the world are Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and the Chinese Communist Party through its control of TikTok, which is the world's most influential media platform. That's a problem. I mean, I don't know what the people can talk about 5 years from now with AI. Right now, we have a problem. Those three individuals or institutions should not be controlling what your kids learn about the world. And we got to act against them.
So let's talk about what's happening in our own dugout. Now, like people often talk about the world of atoms versus the world of bits, right? And we also have the world of electrons. We have all of the energy that these data centers are gonna use. We are seeing a backlash to that in communities. I think not just about the electricity use, but that's a big part of it. How do we scale power to meet the demands for the good parts of AI that we want?
Yeah, I think we got three problems right now with energy. It's a deficiency. We just don't have enough sources of electrons or sources of energy to move the electrons, more precisely. It is delays. Takes too long to build the stuff that we need, and it's dumbness. The grid is not good at storing energy either across time with batteries or across space with interconnectivity. And so any energy policy needs to address all three of those things. Deficiency, we need to put new energy sources onto the grid. I've put forward bills for super hot rock geothermal, for example. We got to do more nuclear. And I actually will give the administration credit on nuclear. They're doing the right things on nuclear. We got to put offshore wind. Here the administration's been horrible. Hydropower, solar, we need all of it. We need to do it fast. Can't take 10 or 15 years. The environmentalism of the last 50 years was about blocking bad stuff. The environmentalism of the next 50 years needs to be about building good stuff, and that means with speed, and that's going to require energy permitting reform. And then we need to make the grid smart, storing energy, time, and space.
So this brings me to a question that I think actually goes beyond just AI and power and is a general energy abundance problem, which is that you look at China and they're just adding a ton of renewables, also a ton of coal, sadly, but they have decided that electricity is the future and they are investing in it. And the United States basically sometime around the year 2000 decided that we had enough electricity and now the job was just to focus on how we generate it. And that was, I think, a crucial mistake that we now have to undo. But you've got a lot of democratic interest groups that are now invested in things that are going to slow that, whether it is degrowth environmental groups that want to keep the permitting, but you also have unions who they want prevailing wage, they want, and I understand that if I were in union, I would also want very high wages, but that is going to slow the pace of growth. So which fights should Democrats pick within their coalition in order to make energy abundance happen?
I accept the premise about degrowth as a bad approach. I don't accept the premise that construction labor agreements slow things down or make things harder to build out. I don't think that's actually the trade-off. And for example, these data center, these hyperscalers that want to put their own energy behind the meter, I'm not going to speak for all of them. I have a strong hunch they would be thrilled to do construction labor agreements with unions if they could get the permits now. And if they could get the interconnection queue cleared now to actually build the darn thing. So I don't think paying people a good wage is is the impediment. I think the problem is you try to get a permit, it takes 3 years with 70,000 pages of documentation, and then you get litigated for another decade. That's the problem. And thankfully, there's some great clean energy groups out there now, Institute for Progress and Breakthrough, that are starting to think about climate action through the lens of build fast.
So you have introduced possibly my favorite bill name ever, the Hot Rocks bill. Talk a bit about these emerging sources of energy, geothermal, nuclear. Can you rank order, like, what are the most promising things to unlock the kind of energy that America is going to need? Not just, again, for AI. We have to electrify our cars and our heat pumps and all the rest of it.
Right. No, I can't prioritize them, and I shouldn't. No, I think politicians sitting in Washington should tell the country in a $35 trillion economy all the right energy sources. We should be humble. What we should do is say to utilities, to consumers, to energy generators, here's one set of rules that are consistent, here's what we're looking for, and then you go through markets and build out what we're going to need. Because markets are smarter than this one individual can be. What I can say is we're not doing that well for hot rock, which is why I put this bill forward. This is a bipartisan bill, and it is promoting a new technology that, instead of using drill tips, like diamond tip drills to go 1 mile or 2 miles deep, like they do in Iceland, for example, it is a new technology that uses plasma microwaves to melt the rock. And when you do that, you don't have to go 1 or 2 miles deep, you can go 5 to 10 miles deep, and it's hot everywhere on the Earth's surface when you go 5 to 10 miles deep. That is a huge deal because it allows us to tap into a high baseload, affordable, dispatchable power anywhere on Earth, including in China and India, which account for 60% of all future fossil fuel emissions, and you're going to have a lot of these stranded coal-fired power plants that they could repurpose with this technology. So I did this with a Republican. It's a great bipartisan issue. Democrats love clean energy, Republicans love to drill stuff, and so it was like, let's do it together. And it's the kind of thing that even in this environment in Washington we can get done.
This is the thing I think a lot about with China and India and emerging markets, right? Is that we're not going, I think the approach on clean energy has long been, well, we just need to mandate people to use it. But the problem now has shifted to how do we get China and India and other countries that want to get rich to use it voluntarily. And that means it has to be superior, right? It cannot just be that we've told people they have to use it. It has to be cheaper and better.
That's right.
How does the federal government support that, that broader mission of decarbonizing the planet before we cook it?
No, totally. I think that's exactly right. I think geothermal and nuclear are particularly promising, but we have to become an export powerhouse on these two technologies. 50 years ago, Richard Nixon said we should build 1,000 nuclear power plants over 50 years. Imagine if we had done that, what this country would look like in terms of climate, in terms of our manufacturing base for energy, in terms of energy diplomacy. We didn't do that, but the second best time to plant a tree is now, and we should do it now, and we should go down the manufacturing cost curve on small and large modular nuclear, and so that we can start to compete with China in Africa and Southeast Asia when it comes to nuclear export. And then the super hot rock that I'm talking about, I think it's especially promising for China and India for their capacity to retrofit their coal-fired power plants, because as you said, they're building a lot of them. No country is going to want to strand expensive assets, but the good news is you can take a full coal-fired power plant, you can keep the superstructure, but instead of using coal as the energy source, you can use super hot rock as the energy source, and so they don't have to strand the asset.
So thinking about regulation a little bit, one of the big barriers, so in the supreme irony of my life as a libertarian columnist, my father was a lobbyist for the heavy construction industry in New York and the tri-state area. And one of the things he said was that adding federal money to a project would add like 5 years because you've got now all of these interlocking problems of, how do we think about cleanly making regulatory reform happen when you have all of these different authorities? I think you saw this with the interconnector in New England that failed because Massachusetts wanted the energy, New Hampshire ultimately killed it, NIMBYs in Maine killed it. How do you balance the need to build out the power grid with all of these federalism concerns? And is there a different way that we can approach this that is going to, rather than layering more federal regulations on more problems, actually reduce the problems across the board?
Yeah. one, we need permitting reform. So you have to make it a higher bar to bring litigation that can slow things down over 10 to 15 years. Community input is not a synonym for neighbor's veto. You can't run a country that way. I will also say that my predecessor, Joe Kennedy, who some of you may recall from when he worked here, he was also in energy and commerce. What he's doing now is running this outfit called Citizens Energy, maybe, that actually tries to solve this problem by basically allowing energy generators to provide community benefits along the adjacencies of a new transmission line, so that it's trying to solve this kind of asymmetric benefits and costs problem by sharing some of the future benefits with the immediate abutters today. And he's having some success, I think, mostly on the West Coast at this point.
And how do you think about regulating AI? I mean, so Yuval Levin of the American Enterprise Institute has argued that we think about federalism wrong, is that we tend to use federalism as a layer on top of the states rather than cleanly separating responsibilities where the federal government should be doing everything and those where the states can probably handle it. So if you think about like healthcare, there's a real argument for nationalizing regulation. For education, the states are probably competent to handle that on their own.
Yeah.
And when I think about AI, it seems like a national level regulation problem, right? Is that it seems like an issue where you don't want the most conservative state to be the de facto regulator for the entire country, nor necessarily the most liberal state. How do we think about, again, the federal versus state responsibilities and making sure we can grow this technology without having 50 different regulatory regimes kind of clashing and slowing things down?
I think at the federal level, we have about, I think, three things that we absolutely have to do. One is we have to amend Section 230, which is the liability shield for the big tech platforms, to make clear that AI bots and the platforms do not have liability protections. It is ridiculous that you could be sued for defamation, and yet an AI bot that spews out InfoWars-style disinformation about a school shooting would not be. That's ridiculous. And we should not provide a federal liability shield for that kind of lies. Basically, we shouldn't shield them from tort law. Which has tort law is 1,000 years of accumulated human wisdom about the right way to treat people. And then we basically said to these big tech companies, hey, you're excused from that 1,000 years of wisdom. And then we're shocked that they behave badly. Well, we have allowed them to behave badly. They can't be sued for it. So we got to amend that. Number two is we got to amend the Internet Tax Freedom Act to allow the states to tax social media advertising revenue. These social media corporations are attention fracking our kids. They're monetizing the attention spans of Americans. It's a huge negative externality, and taxation is an appropriate recourse for that, but the states can't do it. Utah, Maryland, California have all been frustrated. And then at the federal level, we should, I think, basically try to create the Consumer Product Safety Commission to be like a center of excellence on the harms of social media or AI, or maybe not the harms, but the cognitive effects of deep use. But then allow the states to go from there and to regulate. I am not bothered by the prospect of a patchwork of regulations to start with, actually. I think we should empower states to figure out what makes sense for their constituents on consumer safety, on education, on healthcare. And the federal government should just remove some of the obstacles to states taking the lead.
So, I mean, I think that AI is going to change law in all sorts of ways. I've been thinking about what it's going to do to copyright law, and I think that's going to be extremely interesting. But it wouldn't making companies liable for any mistake end up functionally killing the industry?
No, and to be clear, that's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do, what my law does is, my bill, is establish a duty of care. So, I'll give you an example. Deepfake pornography. Almost all deepfake videos on the internet today are non-consensual pornography of women. And these platforms have zero liability for that. Facebook had a 17 strikes and you're out policy for sex trafficking accounts. First 16 times that they were flagged for sex trafficking was okay. The 17th time they had a problem. What my bill would do is say that if you don't have a process in place to identify and take down non-consensual deepfake pornography, you lose your Section 230 immunities and you can be sued in a court of law. And that sort of trade of a liability shield in exchange for a duty of care exists in all the other sectors of our life. Nursing homes get that, right? Educators get that. Law enforcement officials get that. These social media platforms have gotten the liability shield. They never owed society a duty of care. That has to stop.
All right, this is the last, since this will also be aired on my podcast, this is the last question we ask all our guests. What are you optimistic about?
What am I optimistic about? I think 26 is going to be a better year for Team Normal than 25 was in general.
From your lips to God's ears.
Yeah, I think there's a few things I'm optimistic about. One, I see the blood and soil populism of J.D. Vance and MAGA being countered by constitutional patriotism, not just by Democrats, but by, I think, the big middle of this country. J.D. Vance said in 2024 to the Republican convention, he talked about his family's cemetery plot in eastern Kentucky, and he said, people won't die for an idea, but they will fight for their homeland. And he was literally saying, my blood is in this soil, literally. And it was an implicit taunt of Democrats, saying, you Democrats, you guys are so weak, you won't fight for your ideas. I think J.D. Vance is going to find out in 2028 that actually Democrats and Americans will fight for ideas. From Bunker Hill to Shiloh to Normandy to Selma, actually Americans do fight for ideas. And the ideas of the American creed, that the circumstances of your birth should not determine the condition of your life, are far more powerful than blood and soil baiting.
That is a good answer. Well, I'm going to pass this off to my colleague Dan Marica, who will speak with Republican Senator Ted Budd. Rep. Auchincloss, thank you so much for being with us.